Unless you put a gun to my head, I would probably never choose to consume cannabis again. And it's not because I'm scared of relapse or developing a cannabis addiction again, despite struggling for several years of my life with a cannabis substance use disorder. If you are looking to quit consuming cannabis, maybe today's video and the 7 reasons why I would never consume cannabis again could be a little extra push or motivation for you to quit. Now, real quick, if you're over the age of 30 and you're struggling with a cannabis substance use disorder, I have a brand new protocol that has a 98% success rate at helping people get sober in as little as 48 hours in real time, in real life, from the comfort of their own home without going to ongoing meetings or using willpower. This protocol is specifically for high performance individuals. So if you're an entrepreneur, a business owner, a C-suite executive, maybe you're a medical physician, maybe you're an attorney, you're a real estate professional, you work in high pressure sales, or you're a consultant, we have a completely private protocol for you, and you can learn more about that with the link in the video description. Reason number 1 why I would never consume cannabis again is because I never want to become complacent performing at 50% of my actual potential. And that was one of the worst side effects of cannabis substance use that I experienced. I became okay with performing at 50% of what I was actually capable of in my physical health, in my mental health, in my career, in my relationships. And I never want to experience that again. The amount of wasted time, energy, money, physical health, and potential that I suffered through 9 years of cannabis substance use and abuse is something I never want to backtrack on again. Reason number 2, I would never consume cannabis again, is because I never want to be physically dependent upon a drug. I don't want to be physically dependent upon cannabis to experience happiness. I don't want to be physically dependent upon a substance to experience sadness. I want to be able to wake up, go through my day, and handle that day as it's dished out to me. I don't want my happiness, my sadness, my emotions, or my state of well-being to be dependent upon the use of a substance ever again in my life. It's a type of imprisonment. It's a type of hell that I really wouldn't wish upon anyone. And that's why I don't consume a lot of substances. I don't drink alcohol anymore. I don't use stimulants anymore. I don't use, vapes and tobacco products anymore. I don't watch adult media content. I don't want my emotional well-being to be dependent upon a substance. And it went even deeper than that. Cannabis for me got to a point where I couldn't sleep without it. I couldn't eat without it. It got to a point where I didn't like socializing without it. My whole life revolved around my cannabis and substance use. And I never want to develop that level of physical dependence and psychological dependence to a substance again. It's a type of imprisonment that I don't want anyone to ever experience, because honestly, it's a living hell. And if you can relate to it, you know exactly what I'm talking about in this video. We had a client recently that I was working with, and one of his primary motives for stopping was he was like, look, I really love my wife. I really love my family, but I can't even enjoy a dinner with them. I can't even go on vacation with them without having to worry about having this drug, without having this plant with me. I just want to be able to take my family on vacation, enjoy my time with them, and not have to worry about when am I going to get my next hit? When am I going to get my next dose? Who am I going to buy it from? Where am I going to buy it from? An experience that I very closely was able to relate to this person on. It's not something you want to mess with. It's truly a form of entrapment. Reason number 3 is because I've come to understand I only have one brain and I only have one body, and I got one shot to make the most of it during my time on this earth. And I don't want to mess that up any more than I already kind of have. I have worked with literally hundreds, if not thousands of people, helping them overcome various substance use disorders. A majority are struggling with cannabis, but I've helped with a lot of things. And the amount of mental health challenges, the amount of cases of psychosis, the amount of physical harm that I've seen people endure from a cannabis substance use disorder is quite frankly terrifying. The thought of consuming a Delta 8 product or an edible or taking a hit off a dab pen or a cart and going again into an acute state of psychosis, something that I once dealt with and experienced throughout my cannabis addiction, is absolutely terrifying. And I've seen that happen to people, and I've seen people recover, but not be able to fully come back to the person that they once were. And that is a risk that I simply don't want to take ever again. That drug, it honestly scares me to an extent just because of the amount of horror stories that I've seen and that I've had to help coach people through. It's absolutely terrifying. If you read about cannabis and you read about someone, if you've been hospitalized 3 or more times for psychotic behavior resulting from cannabis, your chances of developing schizophrenia later on in life are significantly increased compared to someone who's never consumed cannabis. That in and of itself is enough of a reason for me to never consume it again. The amount of people I've talked to who have bought kind of a black market or gray market Delta 8 product or Delta 10 product, taken a few rips of it, and then had a psychotic break or some mental health crisis is, you wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. It's absolutely terrifying, and I don't want to mess with it. Not to mention all the physical health problems and all the physical health anxiety that I was dealing with on a day-to-day basis during my active substance use. I was constantly worried about my cardiac health, my gut health. I was constantly worried about, the body pain that I was feeling and the brain fog and just endless symptoms that I was experiencing day to day. My health anxiety during my cannabis consumption was through the roof. And that health anxiety was taking away from brain power that I needed to put into my business, that I needed to put into my family, that I needed to improve my life, my quality of life. We just had a physician enroll in our programs who was struggling with cannabis substance use. And when I asked this individual why they enrolled, they said because of all the research and all the literature coming out about cannabis. Specifically, the thing that did it for them that made them want to stop was they saw that bombshell heart study. I just actually did a video on it. I'll link it at the end of this video. And the study talks about cannabis consumption doubling your risk of having a heart attack, stroke, or some major cardiac event. I don't think people realize the multitude of problems that can develop from a cannabis substance use disorder. It's absolutely terrifying. And the crazy thing is, people are just so unaware and so uneducated about this stuff because cannabis is in such a highlight right now. All of this information is constantly being buried. But this study on heart health and the complications from it was such a big study, they really couldn't bury it. I'll link that video where I talk about it at the end of today's video. Now, reason number 4 I would never consume cannabis again is because I did suffer from a condition called CHS, which is an abbreviation for Cannabinoid Hyperemesis Syndrome. There's 3 stages to this syndrome. Stage 1 usually just starts off with nausea and a lack of appetite and an inability to eat. And the person winds up thinking they need cannabis to eat food, and they think that it helps cure the nausea. Stage 2 typically results in weight loss, malnutrition, excessive vomiting, and extreme body pain only relieved by hot showers. And then stage 3 is hopefully the eventual recovery from this condition once the person stops consuming cannabis. I developed CHS. I only had stage 1. I didn't advance to stage 2 with the nonstop vomiting and throwing up, but it was horrible. I lost about 30 pounds unintentionally. I couldn't eat without consuming cannabis because I was so physically dependent upon the drug to eat food. My endocannabinoid system was dependent upon it, and it took me out of the gym. It started to take me out of my job. I was having to start to take medical related leaves of absence because my energy was so low. The physical pain was so bad. CHS is a horrible condition that I probably wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. I say that, but maybe I would. I could think of a few people who I might wish that on. No, all jokes aside, it's really, really bad. The reality is recovering from CHS was equally challenging. Doctors didn't know what to do. When it came to into nutrition. No one had good input. So I found myself lost on Reddit forums and YouTube videos and trying to figure out what was going on with me. All this time I'm spending money on copays, neurologist, rheumatologist, primary care physician, endocrinologist, and no one could figure out what was wrong with me. And it was such a horrible chapter of my life when I had CHS. I was working with a young man recently in our programs who had developed CHS. It did get properly diagnosed, but he was still convinced that cannabis was giving him some benefits. He couldn't stop smoking. He had a substance use disorder. He had an addiction to it. So he enrolled in our programs. We finally got him to quit. And within 3 to 4 weeks, all of his symptoms completely reversed. And I know I texted him. I'm publishing this video the day after the 4th of July. And I texted him checking in on how he was doing. And he said, "Hi on life right now. Feeling great. We'll touch base again soon." So CHS, the one thing that you need to realize with it, and this is another reason why we coach people on it, is even if you consume cannabis again later on in life, like years later after stopping, those symptoms can reoccur. All of those CHS complications and problems can come back like overnight just from starting to smoke again a little bit or consume cannabis again a little bit. So that's something to be aware of if this sounds like something that you're struggling with, okay? Reason number 5, I would never consume cannabis again, is simply because I don't trust the drug anymore. It's become an industrialized drug. The big government has gotten their hands into it, and I just don't trust it. And there's a few reasons why I don't. I was working with a young gentleman, a high schooler, and he actually happened to be his high school's plug. He was the primary dealer of cannabis for his high school, but he was also struggling with a lot of cannabis substance use problems and all the side effects of addiction, right? Damaged relationships, damaged financial health, damaged physical health. And his parents had enrolled him in our programs. And when I was talking to him about the products he sells, he was showing me, and he had QR codes on the products on his packs. And I was like, "Oh, that's impressive. You guys do third-party testing? Like, that's a lot of money." And he was like, "No, man, what I actually do is we get all the packaging off of like DHgate, Alibaba, whatever. We have it custom made." And then he was taking the QR codes and he was linking it to a reputable cannabis brand's third-party testing, editing all the third-party testing in like a PDF editor, like Adobe or something like that, whatever it was. And then he was linking those real but fake, right, counterfeit test results, third-party test results, to the QR codes on his packs. And I was like, wow, that is truly evil and deceiving to your customers. Crazy, the stuff that I've seen. Now, also, you got all these sprayed packs. They're especially popular here in New York, where they're spraying synthetic terpenes and other things like that on the cannabis to change the color, to change the scent, to change the euphoric effects. And that's coming with significant health consequences, cardiac consequences, neurological consequences, gastrointestinal consequences. I just don't trust the drug anymore. And quite personally, I think we've gone way too far. I understand the benefit of isolating certain endocannabinoids and things like that from the plant, but now we got such high THC strains, even the medical strains, and it's causing major problems for people. If you know anything about cannabis, the plant was supposed to be consumed in its full spectrum form, not in isolate form like a lot of the stuff people are buying today. And the drugs that we're buying today, even in medical dispensaries, are so unbalanced. It's not how the plant was intended to be used. And I think we're starting to see the consequences of that. There was just a bombshell study that came out, and I'll be publishing a video later this week on it, where the LA Times covered it. A bunch of even cannabis websites covered it. They studied I think it was 50 or 60 reputable medical dispensary grade and recreational grade brands. And they were all popping positive for pesticides and fungicides, things that can make people really, really, really sick if inhaled. So even the regulated stuff is coming back really, really negative when it comes to the third-party testing, and I have completely lost trust in the industry as a whole, and I have no interest in being part of that experiment. Reason number 6 I stopped consuming cannabis is because I simply can't relate to that group of people anymore. And I don't say this from a judgmental standpoint, but it's just not me. I do consider myself a high performance individual. I am a very successful, multi times over and over again entrepreneur. I'm a business owner. I own a private healthcare practice, chiropractic office, and I value success. I value high performance. I value my physical health. I value my financial health. I value my mental well-being. And just time and time again, when I would be hanging out with a lot of my buddies and people that smoke a lot, I just couldn't relate to them anymore. I didn't want to be that person who's getting excited to go to the dispensary for the newest strain, OG Kush of the gods, purple, whatever. It just didn't align with my values, and I eventually started to lose relatability to that community. It's not from a place of judgment. We were just no longer on the same page anymore. I ran into an even bigger problem when I tried to quit, because then I found myself in 12-step communities and other groups like that, and I was like, well, I don't really relate to these people either. Like, I have a lot more on my mind than just being in recovery from an addiction the rest of my life, and that became its own problem, which is kind of why I developed the addiction exit protocol, which I mentioned if you're a high performance individual looking to quit, you can learn a little bit more about with the link in the video description. I have a lot of friends who smoke. They have great careers. They're great family people, whatever it may be, but we're just not on the same page anymore. I wasn't trying to be a 36-year-old male trying to recreate my college experience. It wouldn't make sense. And if anything, trying to do that for so many years just turned out to be extremely painful. And it kind of started to backtrack me eventually in life. And the goal is to go forward, not backwards. Reason number 7, I don't consume cannabis, is because I have a kid and I have another kid on the way. I don't want my kids to see their dad being dependent upon alcohol or cannabis or stimulants or drugs to spend time with them. And I can't tell you the amount of parents that I've worked with whose relationships with their children or their significant other are at serious risk because of their cannabis consumption. I can't take my daughter to soccer practice without getting high. And then I'm worried about what the other parents are thinking. Do they smell it on me? Do they notice that I'm stepping away to hit my vape, to smoke a cigarette, to smoke weed, whatever it may be? I don't want that image of myself to be what's ingrained in my kids. And if I've learned anything about having kids, it's monkey see, monkey do. I could tell my son something, but he copies me to a T. He copies what I say. He copies the watches that I wear when he sees watches and I'm wearing them. He copies everything I do. It's monkey see, monkey do. And I want to leave my kids with a certain set of values, a certain set of standards, a certain degree of work ethic. I want to teach them, because life is hard. I want to teach them how to cope in a healthy manner, in a productive manner. And I don't want to leave them with some image of a dad who has to drink because he got in an argument with his wife, or who has to go get stoned because he's bored and tired at their school events or their events. I respect parents who want to do it. We are all adults. We can all make our own choices, and how you want to parent might be different than how I want to parent. But I know for me and the type of person I am and the direction I'm trying to bring my family, that wasn't in line with what I was trying to do. And for that reason, I would never consume cannabis again. If you're struggling with this stuff, and maybe withdrawals are what you're dealing with, and that's what's holding you back from stopping, follow me right into the next video where I talk a little bit about those cardiac complications, and I give you some tips and tricks on how to quit. All right, I'll see you in the next video.